Wow. We thought people might be interested in telling some stories. I think we've got that right. This is excellent. Thank you for showing up for Public Radio Week. The first one, not only we've done, but the first in the country, and also for Stink Bug Night. This is the first time, and maybe not the last, that we'll do this in Springfield. I'm Randy Eccles. I'm the general manager of NPR Illinois, and thank you so much for your support and coming out tonight. It's awesome that we get to do things like show off new art spaces in town and also get people to express themselves in other ways. We do news for sure, but the arts and culture are really important to us. So thank you for the Gateway Foundation. They've helped support this during the week to help underwrite some of the costs of Public Radio Week, and I couldn't be more thrilled. If you were here earlier in the week, you might have gone to the old state capitol and saw the 21st Live, or you might have gone to the PAR Hall of Fame and met some journalists like Natasha Korecki and Patty Culhane of Al Jazeera, or Trif Alatzis of the Baltimore Sun. Yesterday, we had Scott Simon in from Weekend Edition Saturday, and he was tremendous in his comments over at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum. We've got more to come. Tomorrow, State Week, will be live over at the Lincoln Herndon Museum at noon, Lincoln Herndon Law Offices at noon. And then also we have tomorrow, if you'd like to talk about it, I'd like all you to come and help talk about it, legalization of marijuana, how high the revenue. We're doing a forum, and that's going to be at the Anvil and Forge about a block away here. You can come talk and ask questions or listen to a panel of experts about what's going on. And then Public Radio Week wraps up Friday with the Tiny Desk Concert, also back at Anvil and Forge. We've got some great bands that are going to be there, local bands, and Jeff Williams is going to be there from here, and Deep Hollow and many others. So we really appreciate all your support and coming out to the different events. We weren't sure how this was going to work. It was a lot to attempt in a week, but it's been working out great, and we're happy to have you here tonight. So without much more ado, I'd like to introduce one of our tremendous reporters at NPR Illinois, and we have a great staff, but a huge supporter of the arts is going to take you into the evening, Rachel Otwell.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. Excuse the index cards, I'm a nerd. Also, first order of business, keys. Somebody has misplaced their keys. So I'm going to put them. Good question. Report, yeah, I'm gonna put them over here. There we go. All right, so I'm just gonna kind of set some ground rules here. Just a little bit more about what we do at NPR Illinois. We've hosted poetry readings, the Shelter Belt series. Some of you may have attended those. We've done a number of art shows. This is one where we've come out into the community, which I think is really important. So thank you so much to Jeff Williams, who helped put all that together. He's part of the pharmacy. Thanks to the pharmacy. Round of applause. So I used to also co-host and put together arts and culture podcast called The Scene, which is really just an example of some of the experimentation I've been allowed to do at NPR Illinois when it comes to the arts. And this is another example of that. So I'm not to thank for this, I'm just hosting, but just want to say, we don't know what we're doing, okay? So thank you for coming and being a part of this, and we'll see where this goes from here. The term competition is being used very loosely, okay? Public radio, we have nothing to give you but our love. No budget, so really there's no pressure, okay? No pressure, and also just, you know, the topic is very light, being life and death, so just want to be cognizant of giving each other respect. So in case it needs said, ground rules, common sense, employ it, no derogatory language, please, and be sensitive to what others may find inhumane or demeaning. All right, so moving right along, we have just a spattering of some invited storytellers. Again, we didn't know how this would go, so I wanted to make sure we had some people on the bill. And first up is Dusty Rhodes, an education reporter at NPR Illinois. I'm sure you all have heard her voice very often on our airwaves. Dusty will get things underway. One other just kind of logistical point here. We're going to have somebody seated up front who will have signs. Hey, Nietzsche, about that. Somebody up front with the signs to say, okay, so there will be signs to tell you, because we are trying to keep everything to 5 minutes just to keep this going. So at 3 minutes, there will be a warning, I'm pretty sure, and at 1 minute, there will be a warning. And then if you start to go over that, I'm going to have to be a little rude and keep it going. So with that being said, Dusty, welcome to the stage. Thank you.
Hey, y'all. I'm from Texas. Okay, so I looked online at like tips for storytelling, and they said, talk about something that's high stakes. So I thought, what was the most high stake moment of my life? When I was 49, I joined roller derby. That wasn't it. That wasn't it. When I was around 40, I moved here from Texas, immediately wrote a story for Illinois Times that completely pissed off the entire Springfield Police Department and the State Journal-Register. And then, here's the risky part, got a license plate with my name on it. But that was not the risky thing. When I was 26, I got on a boat and moved to Alaska. But the most high stakes risk that I can think of happened a few years before that. I was working at the Dallas Morning News, and I was writing a story, a long magazine cover story about a woman who had placed her baby for adoption. That baby had grown up to be smart enough to track her down with no help, but not really wise enough to understand kind of the ripple effects of that. Let's just say they ended up on the Donahue show, okay? That's how badly that went. So in the midst of telling that story for them, I realized that I owed my own birth mother a letter. It was something I've been putting off since my 21st birthday. That's when my college boyfriend decided that the best gift he could give me would be to take me to San Antonio, to the home for unwed mothers, where I was born. So that's where I filled out some paperwork for this nice social worker named Joanne, and a few weeks later, she sent me a packet of non-identifying information. She also reached out to my birth family to see if they would be open to having contact with me. And the answer that she got, the answer she told me was, not at this time. My heart kind of heard no, but what she said was not at this time. I didn't cry about that. I mean, what are you going to do, right? And she said what I should do is write a letter that she would keep in a file, and that way, if they ever called, the letter would be there. I kind of put that on the way back burner. So here I was at the morning news writing this story, and it occurred to me, like, what if they did call and there wasn't a letter? So I called Joanne. She was still there. It had been a few years. She was still at the adoption agency. And she immediately started lobbying me to let her call them again. I'm like, are you crazy, lady? And I said, this is my high stakes risk right here. I kind of felt like she told me that I had been one of her first cases and that she'd gotten a lot better at talking people into this. And I kind of felt like she was leading me to the edge of an emotional cliff and just saying, trust me, I've got a better bungee cord this time. Thank you, B. And then she said, I really want you to meet your grandmother. I think you two have a lot in common. She's a real character. And so I said yes, mainly because I felt sorry for Joanne that's her idea of how to persuade me, but I could tell she was really trying. So I said yes, and sure enough, it was a little better result. My grandmother agreed to let me write her a letter, and next thing I know, I get a call from my birth mom. Now, in a Lifetime movie or a Hallmark special, this is where you have the honeymoon period, you meet, you hug, you cry, all that stuff. That never happened. My grandmother just became my pen pal. She called me Pandora's box. She wouldn't even talk to me on the phone, much less meet me. My birth mother put off meeting me for years, actually until right before I got on the boat to move to Alaska. And then I had to meet her at a motel on the interstate. I've seen her a dozen or so times since then. Her whole family knows me, but she still won't acknowledge me publicly. So there were a couple of good things about taking that risk. One was I got a couple siblings that I really get along with. That's awesome. Another thing is I learned something about my heritage. I'm descended from Daniel Boone, which means I'm also kin to Pat Boone. So I'll hurry. On my father's side, I have a great uncle who's a decorated war hero. If you Google the baddest man in the 761st, that's my great uncle. You'll also find out that the 761st was the very first African American tank battalion. So I found out I'm what Margaret Mitchell would call an octoroon. But the best thing was that then when I adopted my son, Evan, stop the clock. We made it such an open adoption that I feel like his birth family kind of adopted me too. He's going to graduate a month from today. They will be the ones here flagrantly violating the hold your applause till the end rule. And one last thing, I know I'm out of time, but Evan's birth mother was also adopted. And I had tried for years to help her connect with her birth family. Nothing ever worked because she was placed through social services. At Christmas, Ancestry.com put their kits on half price. I sent her a kit, and a couple months later, her birth mother called. Now, my kid will never have to take the same high-stakes risk that I did. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dusty. Okay, so this is where we start the portion of who knows what's gonna happen. All right, I know what's gonna happen. Jess M. is going to be invited to the stage. Jess M.
Okay, either my heart is beating so fast I can't tell, or it stopped beating altogether. There once was a man who was best friends with a woman. Now, their names aren't important, but their story is. They had been best friends since childhood. Romantic partners once, but not again. The man had lived a fairly successful life. Nice car, nice job, college degree, all the staples on the American dream checklist. Life had not been so kind to the woman. When she tried to reach for the top, she always seemed to be dragged back down. She had gotten by, sure, but the toll of every new failure wore her down. One day, it wore her down so much she realized she did not feel like fighting anymore. She did not feel like doing anything anymore. She confessed these feelings to her friend. The friend, wanting to help her, thought of a solution. He told her that every morning they would meet for coffee. When they met up, she would have to tell him one reason why she was happy to be alive that day. She said okay, even though she was not entirely sure what she was going to answer. The next day, the man and woman met up, as promised. He began by asking, "Why are you alive today?" And the woman shrugged, casually replying, "I have work today." Well, work is important, it's a start. And they went about their day. The next day, he asked again, "Why are you alive today?" He expected another simple reply, and the reply was simple, but not what he expected. A lasagna recipe. The man laughed. "I'm sorry, what?" "A lasagna recipe," the woman replied. "Well, I'm glad you found a reason, but you've never mentioned liking lasagna before, so why a recipe?" "Oh no, I hate lasagna." The woman shook her head. "I hate tomatoes. But my Aunt Rebecca loves tomatoes. I found a recipe last night, and it recommended adding more parsley to the sauce. I need to share it with her." And they went about their day. The next day, he asked again. Season 5, Episode 9. "What?" "Season 5, Episode 9 of my favorite show comes out tonight. I don't want to miss it." And they went about their day. This pattern continued on for several weeks, each time the woman's answer strange. One day it was because it was free yogurt day at the store by her work. One day it was because she forgot to return a library book. And one day, the strangest, was because she could not find the missing pair to her sock. It had become routine to the point where the man did not even ask the question. The woman simply answered as her greeting in the morning. Finally, the man gathered the courage to ask her about it. "Why do?" She interrupted. "Because I forgot to call my sister back." No, not that." He paused. "Why do you always choose the weirdest reasons?" The woman raised an eyebrow. "I don't understand. Are they bad reasons?" "No, of course not. Any reason is good, but they're just strange. I thought you were going to say things like, because my family loves me, or because I know it gets better, not because you needed to call someone back. So I'm curious, I guess." The woman thought for a moment, then pointed to her right. An old bridge was under construction. "Do you remember that bridge, how it collapsed last week?" "Yeah," the man nodded. "Do you remember any details about the collapse?" "Well, I know that no one died, but a couple of people were injured. Not much else. Why?" "Do you remember what you were doing?" "Yeah, I was watching the game. I got mad that they interrupted it and accidentally knocked over my soda. Took 4 dang paper towels to clean up one little soda." The woman nodded. "Was the soda being knocked over super important?" Man tilted his head. "No, not really. I just grabbed another one." "But you remember it better than the bridge. Does that mean you didn't care about the bridge? Does that mean you didn't care that people were hurt?" "No," the man was shocked. "Of course I care. Why would you say that?" "I'm getting there. So when it came down to it, you were more focused on what was in front of you, the little mundane things, rather than the big picture?" "Yes, I suppose I was." He looked back to the bridge. "But I still don't understand." The woman smiled. "When you go through your life, do you remember what happened to the world, what changed society, or do you just remember what happened to you and those around you?" "I would have to say what's going on around me. I care about the people around me first and the world second. I don't know what's going on in the world too much, and I don't mind as long as what I've got right here is okay." The woman began walking past him. "Then I'll ask you, why are you alive today?" And they went about their day.
Thank you, Jess M. Next up will be Marsha Stout.
When my husband and I got married in 1992, we did that thing that I think all newlywed couples do. We talked about our hopes and our dreams for the future. We dreamed and hoped we'd start our own family. We hoped that we'd raise them with our values. We hoped that someday we would have grandkids to spoil, and that we'd grow old together. So when Jim's doctor told us in May of 2014 that his illness was terminal, we grieved. We grieved the loss of those things that we knew we were not going to see together. And our boys grieved with us because every day cortical basal degeneration took a little bit more of Jim away from us. First it was the use of his hands. Then his balance got really awful and there were a lot of falls. Then it was his ability to clothe himself, feed himself, groom himself, or to find the words that he so desperately wanted to say. At the end, the dementia left him with the mind of about a 6 or 7-year-old. We did realize some of those dreams. You heard me just mention our boys. Our oldest turned 24 last week, and our youngest is 21, and we did raise them to be wonderful young men. I am so proud of them. When Jim died on January 13th, 2018, our boys were 22 and 19. Jim was 19 when his dad died, and there was a constant longing for all those things his dad had missed. Marriages, births, knowing his grandkids. And I know that my boys are going to have that same longing for Jim. And I hope that they will be able to remember all those wonderful things about their dad before he was sick. I hope that I have shown the strength that they've needed to help them grieve over the last 16 months. I hope that this hole in my heart will start to not feel like it's the size of an ocean. I hope that I will be able to love our future daughters-in-laws and grandkids enough for both of us. And I hope that the stories I tell my grandkids will help them to feel like they know their grandfather. The night that Jim died, it had been a long day of watching and wondering and waiting, and I was exhausted. So at about midnight, I told Jim, I'm going to go lay down just for an hour, but Christian, our oldest, is going to be here with you. And about half an hour later, Christian came running in, and he was frantic. And he said, Mom, something's wrong. Dad's breathing really hard, and he's got his arm out, up, reaching out. And so I jumped up out of bed, and by the time I got to the living room, he was gone. It wasn't until after the funeral and all the family had gone home that I started thinking about Christian saying that Jim had had his hand raised in the air. Jim had been unconscious for 48 hours. How could he have his hand raised up in the air? And then it hit me. Someone had come and was there, and he was reaching out to them to take him to the other side. I hope it was his dad that he had longed for all those years, and that his mom and his brother were with them. And I hope that in those last minutes of my life, someone sees me with my hand reached to the sky, because my Jimmy will be there to take me home. I hope. Thank you.
Marsha Stout, thank you so much for sharing. All right, next up will be Kate Lake.
I'm short. Hi, I'm Kate. In 2011, I lost my tribe. I found out what exile feels like. I was a doctor. I moved to Springfield in 1987 and went to medical school here and did my pediatric residency here, and then I was on faculty at the medical school. And I was your classic workaholic type. And then I can't explain how, because no one can when they're in this situation, but I became addicted to a drug. And because my addiction to approval was greater than my addiction to a substance, I couldn't ask for help. And in the end, my life imploded because I couldn't ask for help. So I had a meeting with the HR department, and they let slip that they were going to call the Department of Justice. And so I was terrified. I was afraid to go home. I thought DEA agents were going to show up and haul me away from my children. And I hid in the park that day. I went to Washington Park to the duck pond. It was cold. It was a freezing rain. I was just so ashamed and so terrified, I didn't know what to do. And my husband finally hunted me down and convinced me to go home. And we got home, and we didn't even have our coats off before a big, black, shiny SUV pulled in the drive, and 2 DEA agents stepped out. And they treated me with much more kindness than I expected. And when they left, I said, "You mean you're not hauling me away?" And they kind of laughed, and they didn't. And so I went off to treatment, and I came home. It was winter. I was too ashamed to be seen. All of my friends were in the medical community. I had no one because my whole life had been spent in the hospital. So I didn't quite know what to do with myself, but finally it got warm and spring came, and I started going to the park. And I sat by the duck pond, and this time, instead of it being cold, it was warm, and there was a wood duck and 2 babies, and across the pond there was a swan. And they were beautiful, and I started going to the park every single day and sitting in the duck pond. And it got to be a very hot summer that summer. It was a drought. I sat under a tree that there was a circle of shade, and they didn't trust me, these critters, but they came to trust me. I took bread every day, and I sat in the park because that was where I found peace, and I didn't feel judged, and I wasn't ashamed to be with the ducks and the swan. Well, they started coming to me. When I got to the park, I would yell. I named the swan Athena, don't ask why, but I would yell for Athena, and she would whip her head around and come paddling as fast as she could to me and sit at my feet until I left. And I fed bread to her, and she ate out of my hand, and this was a big swan. One time, a very friendly golden retriever bounded over to say hello to me, and she perceived it as a ferocious predator, and she decided to defend me against this friendly dog, puffed up to twice her size, and this poor pup ran off terrified. Now it's June, and I have to appear in court for my arraignment. And it was okay. I was treated, again, very respectfully, and I felt okay, you know. I took responsibility for what I had done, and everything was okay until the next day when a big story about me was on the front page of the State Journal Register, and I was on the Channel 17 News. Well, now the shame, I couldn't be seen, so I just laid low. I didn't go to the grocery store, and I stayed going. I went to the park every day because my ducks and my swan, they didn't care, and they were always there. So that went on, and November rolls around. It's cold now, and I have to go to court again for my sentencing. And in my sentencing, you know, it's a federal courthouse with all these mahogany benches. Every seat was filled, and it was filled with members of the recovery community from AA. And the judge said he'd never seen anything like it. And I realized at that point that I had a new tribe. It was just a very different tribe. It was people who approved of me, even knowing the absolute worst, most shaming things about me. Well, a few months passed, and it got cold, and the pond iced over, and Athena finally left. She had to leave because there was no open water. And I missed her, but I was glad because she'd be safe. Spring rolled around. I wanted her to come back, but she didn't. And I looked for her every day, and she didn't. And every time I drove around town and past the lake, I'd stop, get out if I saw swans, and yell, "Athena!" Never saw her. And then in 2015, 3 years later, I'm at a friend's house. There's a swan across the lake. I yell her name. A head whips around, and that swan comes paddling to me and lays its head on my lap. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate. We've already had a lot more bravery on this stage than I've ever been capable of, so thank you so much to those who have shared so far. And next up is Timothy Donovan Russell.
Hey, everybody. The story has a name. It's called So Long, So Long Ago, and it's by me. When I was 6 years old, my family moved into a house north of the airport, right at the corner of West Camp Sangamo Road and Ware Road. That's spelled W-A-R-E, for those of you spelling at home. Incorporated Springfield, Illinois. We lived there for 4 years, very rural, a lot of woods, ponds, mosquitoes, and other dangerous outdoor fun for kids to encounter. It's still largely like that out there, actually, from what I gather. A golf course was built there since. Maybe you people know, I don't know. The only major downside I noticed at the time, and which I still can kind of sense, is that there's a lot of garbage landfills in the area. I think they built the golf course over the garbage landfills. Regardless, that is myself and some other kids, explored that area as much as possible, even the landfills, unsupervised, unbeknownst to our parents, and unbeknownst to whichever municipality or company owned the areas out there, and didn't matter to us. I have a large number of stories about those places, and this is one. I was 9 years old. Several of us, 2 friends and my younger brother, were exploring around a large pond, one which I guess was built by landowners for the purpose of irrigation or flooding runoff or something. The reason I think that is because some of the features were the following: a short waterfall at the north end of the pond, falling off of the pond, and beyond that, a runoff ditch, maybe 5 feet wide and 30 feet long, which ran downhill through the woods and into a large concrete pipe that went underground, presumably feeding the runoff water and whatever other stuff was in the water away under Camp Sangamo Road to wherever human society decides to send such things. Maybe about the runoff ditch was about a 30-degree angle, so it wasn't really like, way down like that. It was more like that. Our group's quest that day, apparently, was to cross this runoff ditch. I don't know why, but that was our quest. So for some reason, there I recall, a small amount of water coming over the side of the waterfall, running down the ditch at the time. You might have a guess as to where this is going. I watched my friends begin to cross, which they all did just fine for whatever reason, and I thought, I can do this. I don't remember what happened next, but I do remember right after that, my feet slipping right out from under me, landing on the slope, and then beginning to slide down the ditch toward the concrete pipe. The surface of the slope was remarkably slippery, which shouldn't surprise me now, but it did at the time. I don't know why, but there was algae or something growing on the ditch, I guess. And I was in that sort of position that you're in on a water slide, like in Knights Action Park, where you're just kind of on your bottom and you're going down, face first, and you're just like going, like that. It's kind of what I was doing. So my only course of action, though, was to turn around and look at my friends as they yelled, "Tim!" I turned around to them and I went, like I waved goodbye, like I was grieving for my loss or their loss or something. I still don't have any idea. So what happened next, right? Well, I came to the bottom and I stopped and I got up and I went back to the top of the pond, and everything was fine. We had many other adventures. Perhaps I'll tell more of those someday. But there's no moral to this story other than just be careful.
Thank you, Tim. Timothy is one of the pharmacy artists. Just a tip, I promise, that was not planned. And so now we're going to invite up one of our invited storytellers. Angie Tanucci is a local artist, poet, and author. She mentors young writers, some of whom are here. And you can find her on Facebook under Angie Tanucci Creations. Welcome, Angie.
Thank you so much. Oh my goodness, I didn't realize how many people had come in. I feel like a rock star. I do run the Teen Creative Writing Club at the library, is what she's talking about. So if anyone has teens interested, you can talk to me after. The thing is, people die every day, and other people are left behind, and most of the time, like in movies and books and some parts of real life, those left behind people are sad that their relatives have died, and even happy to plan memorial services and nostalgic, sorting a life into little boxes, this one for the homeless shelter, that one for Goodwill, this one for the library, that one to the pawn shop. But I wouldn't know what that's like. Honestly, there's no point to separate boxes. Even the homeless can't use this crap. The library certainly doesn't want to infect all the other books with silverfish and probably mouse turds. Why didn't somebody think to burn the house down years ago? Under a fallen skyscraper of newspapers, there are bones. They might have been still perfectly arranged under the papers in cat-shaped formation, a macabre shadow of the once lovely creature sprawled in a strip of sunlight for an afternoon nap. But I forcefully shovel a heavy stack of the disintegrating pages into a garbage bag with my rubber-gloved arm, and the bones spread out and trickle down like a pile down the pile like twigs in a falling river. The papers underneath and around the bones are darker, almost black, where they've absorbed the decay. Beside the skull, there are smaller bones. The cat had chased a rat into the room of Newspaper City. The epic tussle had toppled the papers and done them both in. I wonder how long the cat was trapped there under the probably 2 full years of daily newspapers before it died. I wonder if he noticed his cat was missing. I wonder if he even knew there was a cat in the house. Then the tears come, and I hate myself for them, and I'm glad I'm here alone. I wasn't surprised that he died. I was just surprised someone told me. Granted, it was 2 weeks after the funeral, and now, here inside this dark house that faintly resembles the one I grew up in, I realize it was less out of kind obligation to a man's daughter and more out of necessity. Someone had to come. Someone had to clean out the house, and I wasn't the first person the realtor, Mrs. Beverly Mills, had called. I wasn't even the 5th. But I was the only one left, and I just had to come because nobody else would, and if I didn't, the bank would bulldoze the house with everything inside, and Mrs. Mills just couldn't stand the idea that important, valuable things might end up in the landfill, and she just didn't feel right about going through it herself. I almost didn't come. Even after I told the realtor I would, I almost didn't. But I knew stepping into this space, opening his drawers and his cabinets, touching his clothes, unearthing his secrets, it was all too personal for a stranger to do. If we define strangers by the amount of time they spend with a person, I was probably more stranger than Mrs. Mills, but still, I knew it had to be me. Amongst the newspapers and the bones, I cry for a few minutes or maybe an hour, I'm not sure, telling myself it's because of the cat. A cat died tragically in a newspaper avalanche and nobody noticed, and it's just so sad. And really, if I think about it, the rat story is even sadder. At least the cat got a last meal. It's for them I cry, and maybe that's true for the first 30 seconds, but then it's not. My tears run out, and I realize I'm sitting on a thin layer of newspapers on the floor, and I don't remember getting down there or pulling off the yellow rubber gloves that now have black ink smudges on the fingertips. And then I notice the walls for the first time. They're a dull orange that I know used to be much brighter because I painted them myself the summer after 8th grade. And I'm shocked, absolutely stunned that I didn't realize Newspaper City was my old room until this moment. I look at a corner and think, that's where my bed used to be, and I wonder if maybe it's still there. And as if I know the answer, I push myself up from the floor and step over the little bones and knock a couple more paper buildings over. Here, where the bed is, there aren't neatly stacked towers of Browning newspapers, but a round heap of the glossy inserts with the ads and the coupons. It's all colors, and then Big Rock Candy Mountain is stuck in my head the rest of the afternoon. The bed is there, though, underneath with a moth-eaten comforter that may previously have been some shade of blue. And then I remember the day I picked it out, that comforter that was actually cream-colored originally with little blue flowers, forget-me-nots, and I have to get out of this room. I step to the hall and look in the den that was his personal closet/hamper. There are separate piles of clothes, so they must be organized in some way that made sense to him, but I'm not going in this room either. I make my way to the kitchen, and there's a smell. Well, yes, there are smells of all sorts all throughout the house, but here, it's something familiar underneath the stale, moldy air, something from childhood that I can't quite place, but suddenly I remember the taste of my mom's spaghetti sauce. Then I remember that time he came in the back door, bellowing before we even saw him because Mom burnt the fish sticks. She'd burnt them so bad the oven reeked of fish and charcoal for months, and now I can smell that too. And once the floodgates open, I can't stop the memories from pouring through, and I'm confused at first as to where they've been hidden all this time, and haven't I gotten past all this? Why did I ever think I was strong enough to be in this place again? It's not fair, all the time that passed, the time that's supposed to heal all wounds, and that other bullshit about out of sight, out of mind. Tears come again, and this time I know they've got nothing to do with the dead cat, because this time I'm angry. When is the healing done, if not nearly 2 decades later? When? Can it ever even start when the disease is still there, silently festering, maybe even dormant, but not yet dead? It's cosmic trickery, this emotional herpes, latent, lying in wait until the worst possible moment to spout its red, bulbous, blistering heads. And meanwhile, how many other people am I infecting? How much damage have my own children suffered because of the things locked away behind my walls? I didn't know what I would find here, that maybe I expected some kind of closure, and I think I knew as soon as I started remembering things that happened in the kitchen that the only way out, or at least the best way, would be through. Instead, I call Mrs. Mills. I tell her I'm finished, that I've gotten everything important out, that the bank can smash the house to bits. She's thrilled. I leave through the front door without even bothering to lock it, my car keys in one hand and the white skull of a cat in the other. Once I'm home, I put the skull in a box and tuck it away in the back of a drawer, and years later, when I chance to come across it, I don't remember where it's from. The end. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to Angie. And next up is Marco Mulder.
Help me through the night. Help me if I'm right. Help me through the night. Help me if I'm wrong. Hit me when I'm strong. Hit me, deceive me with lies of open skies, human rights, open all nights, fancy tights, whipped cream, Coke machine, ragged dream, Ovaltine, Reserine, super clean, mighty nice, paradise, overdrive, hammer glide. Naughty boys, anger toys, overboys, intertoys, intellect noise. Read a book, banden vloek, ogen dicht, vergezicht, open dicht, maanlicht, overdrive, ain't no jive. See my wife, make her mine, all the time. Caught her crying, said I'm dying, all the time. Saw you turn, felt the burn of Christ. Jesus' son on the run, peppermint, ain't no sin. Where to begin? Overheard, danger lurks, firework. Who are the jerks? Why are we jerks? Did it ever work? Where's the church? I love my daughter. She fell in the water and now she is dead. Dead for the fishes, but oh so delicious.
Marco is another pharmacy artist. His piece is with Delinda Chaplin. Delinda Chaplin? Sorry, I've only known her my whole life. They are, I'm a little nervous too. They're the big pieces that are lit up over there, and then this big one, just a little fun fact. Okay, next up will be Chris Luttrell. I think I'm saying that right.
I'm really short, so. This is my first time telling a story in front of a bunch of strangers, so. My father died coming up on 9 years ago, and some of the stories kind of got to me, so it got me a little teary-eyed. But his favorite story that he used to tell was the night I was born. And my dad was a big fisherman. My mom was not. She was a super ultra femme girly girl. So he got her to go fishing. It was the summer of '69, nice evening. And Mom was super pregnant, Dad's fishing, and she goes into labor. But the fish are biting. So Mom keeps telling, I'm in labor, we need to go. No, you're fine, the fish are biting, everything's fine. So Mom gets really mad, and I'm gonna make sure I do the PG version of this, because Dad's wasn't. Mom got very, very angry and started, just walking up the road like it was just Lake Springfield here, and she started heading to town. Oh, thankfully. If I stand next to the microphone, that might help too. I can't see over it, so. Move a little closer. Okay, thank you. I'm new to the mic, so. So the fish were biting, Dad didn't want to leave, Mom headed off down the road. So he notices, oh, somebody's missing. So he packs up all his stuff and throws it in the truck and goes up the road and gets her in the car and goes to the hospital. And this was in the evening, like, 9, 10 o'clock at night. I was born at like 10:30 in the morning, so clearly they had plenty of time. So Dad thought she was really worried about nothing. Well, many hours later, it's time to take the baby home and, do the financials. Well, they kept trying to make a payment agreement, and Dad was like, well, I can't afford that. Well, I can't afford that. Well, I can't afford that. Well, now Dad's the one that's all wound up, and he finally got mad and told him to just, keep the damn baby. I'm taking my wife and going home. Apparently, I can't afford a baby, so, but I'll be 50 in June, so it all worked out just fine, but, that first, 12 hours or so were a little overwhelming, so that's the end of my story. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I loved that story. Next up is Jill Steiner. Jill? Welcome, Jill.
So this is about hope and how sometimes it's not clear. So a little bit about my parents. For their honeymoon, they went whitewater canoeing. As a child, I remember them coming home from a trip with half the canoe in the car and half the canoe on top of the car. And they were smiling ear to ear. And hope was so integral in all they did, all they planned, all they dreamed. It was part of their DNA. One of my favorite memories was being caught in a squall in Lake Michigan. Dad trimmed the sails and headed to shore. But on the way, each one of us wearing a life jacket safely reached the front stay, clipped on, put our legs on either side of that stay, hung over the bow, and then rode that front wave. Every time your boat went under the wave, we went under the wave with it. When the wave came up and the boat cleared, we cleared also. It was like you were riding a whale. And so that was kind of the life philosophy. Let's be practical and head to shore, but why not make the best of it and have an adventure along the way? They learned to windsurf at age 60 and picked where they wanted to retire based on the access to water and a good sailing wind. They ended up in North Carolina, nowhere near their children. The adventures did not stop when they retired, they just seemed to multiply. It was kind of flipped. When I was a child, the newscaster would come on and say, it's 9 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? For us, it became, it's November. Do we know where our parents are? And they were never in Florida. It was the Amazon or New Zealand or flying a bush plane to Canada so they could canoe towards the Arctic Circle. While both were adventures, it was my father who planned these adventures. My father was an engineer and everything was planned, notated, and prepared. There was plan A, B, C. He could also build, engineer, and solve just about anything, and he would devour information and science. There was always a project going on. But even with caregivers and medical care, when you have a man like my father and his world becomes increasingly limited, he will become more of a tiger, like a smaller and smaller cage. In his last months, his ability to grasp the days of the week and what was happening around him became a struggle. His mobility and energy was limited, and he became angry. There was open conversation in our family about how they wanted to live their last years. In terms of health care, what measures were too much, it got to be routine for ER visits and medical care. And sometimes we might find out a week or so later that there was an ambulance trip or they were in the hospital for a couple days, but we knew that they would call us if it was really serious. I suggested my dad was stressing about the present and the future to take him back to the past. Their life was captured on film, particularly hundreds of slide trays of their adventures, of their life well lived. With this, he could take the lead. The names of people long past would come to his tongue. His anger lessened, and he seemed more connected in the moment with my mother. It was one of these frequent best days when memories shared shifted to conversation, not about health or day-to-day tasks, but about joy and laughter and friends and family. Hope was back in full color. That afternoon, he stood up and collapsed. When Mom called, she says, yes, it appears to be a stroke, but he was conscious and aware, and we had been here before. The next day, I called my mom, and she said, it's been a quiet morning. I said, quiet how? She said, Dad's not really with it, not very responsive, but she was hopeful. Now, there's one thing about my dad. He was never quiet. This didn't feel right, and I told her I was coming out. This time, there was no, don't need to. This time she said, okay. When I arrived at the hospital the following day, the doctors were waiting to meet me to help me understand he was failing. I came to understand that my mom hoped that when this time came that all of us would be able to get there and say goodbye and be together. She was wanting the doctors to keep my dad going so that my siblings could arrive. Well, even hope can overcome air and time travel. I used my computer thing, that's what my dad called my phone, to have everyone be able to say goodbye via video chat, and he was aware of everyone. After that, my dad was not quiet anymore. He was restless for hours and kept trying to get out of bed. He would not be calmed or comforted. He was stressed. He had been nonverbal since his original collapse. Then clearly he said, "Help me." And there it was again, hope, our hope. With these words, we both clung to the hope that he meant, help me. I'm going to fight this as I've done before. The doctors told my mom his organs were failing, that to keep him going, they would have to do a feeding tube. We talked about how they could prolong his living, but not prolong his life. That being in bed, not being able to move, and with a feeding tube was my father's greatest fear. His profound wish, his hope, was that he would never live that way. That's when my dad's hope overrode my mom's hope. My father was provided the help to finally rest peacefully when he passed away in my mother's arms. It's been almost 2 years since my dad died. My mom has adjusted and is doing well and goes on adventures. For me, I'm still processing. Here's what I've got so far. 1, when you need help, find the strength to overcome physical, mental, and emotional barriers and ask for help and keep asking. Have hope. 2, when someone asks for help, clear your mind of your own thoughts and not just listen, but hear, understand, and accept what they need and what are their hopes. Today, my hope, that we all do our best when someone says, help me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. And now we're going to welcome Erin Hovey, who is a professor at Lincoln Land Community College. She's a local writer and poet, so welcome up, Erin.
There you go. Hey guys. Hi, Gina. I had kind of advertised on my social media page that I was going to read an ecofeminism piece that involves some electric fairies from outer space, but I really don't think I can do it within the time frame, so I'm going to read a poem that I think kind of fits within the genre tonight. It's upside down. It's called How to Execute a Mistake. Load the gun. Secure the ammunition and your reputation. Load the gun with what he said and did, then cry. Cry for all the lost innocence. Cry for every little lie you are about to tell. Cry for help. Rally the people. Find those potato-faced nobodies. Rally the people who shout and lead them to him. Lead them with your bigger stick. Lead them with your accusations. Lead them with the icy youth of your womanhood. Call the sheriff. Lean on that certain and stony body of authority. Call the sheriff and tell him the story. Tell him that you are innocent. Tell him that he is guilty. Tell him the facts, but carefully, very carefully avoid the truth. Hang him. Tie those last words tightly into his throat. Hang him by his neck from the wintry branches, the branches of fingers, the branches of possibilities, the branches of frost across the glassy gray memories. Let him kick. Let those cowardly running legs flail. Let him kick like he isn't at the end of a rope, like this can't be the end, like his feet will find something solid in panic, like death wouldn't be a better fate than always suffocating. weeping. Carry the corpse, lay him in your lap and lick the blood from his neck. Carry the corpse to his grave and bury it. Bury that body in the first place you met. Bury the sweet injustice beneath blooming regret. Bury that sinner in the black space between your ribs. Keep living. Plant your garden over his decaying memory. Keep living and eat the fruits of a life you thought you wanted. Eat what hangs from the branches of choked passion. Eat those flavorless, watery days of reaping. Eat your love and nourish that guiltless wanting which stems from cruelty and a dead man's kiss. Thank you.
Erin, I have your pencil. See me later. Thank you so much for that. I love the mix of different genres and things we have going tonight. What's next? We'll see. Stacy Van Bogart is next.
Good following another short person. I'm a nurse at Memorial, and I work on a unit that does a lot of end-of-life care, known as comfort care. So I know a thing or two about life and death. First of all, I should also say that some of the specifics have been changed to protect both my nursing license and my artistic license. Protect both of those things. The first thing, there are so many deaths that stand out in my mind. And I know this sounds kind of morbid, but you figure I watch about a death a week. Do the same things that the ladies in labor and delivery do, just do it in reverse. One of the ones that stands out to me, well, first of all, if you're going to die, you should first go out and get yourself one of these big overflowing families where the cousins and the aunts and the uncles and the ladies from the church and the guys from the neighborhood all show up. And they bring food, some of which makes itself to the nurse's break room, and they bring stories, and they bring pictures, and they bring the babies in. This is the way death should be done. Now, we had one of these people in. A lady I'm going to just refer to as Mom. That's the way all these generations of people referred to her. She was fairly elderly, and she'd been Mom and Grandma and great-grandma to a lot of these people. And this family was very intent on hearing her last words. What you should know is last words are never as good as they are in the movies. Last words rarely live up to the hype. Now, they said, okay, back off a little on the sedation, a little bit on the morphine. We don't want Mom to suffer, but we want to hear her last words. So against my better judgment, I backed off a little bit on the medication. Mom seemed pretty comfortable, so I wasn't feeling, ethically challenged there. And Mom slowly opens her eyes and she yells, "Jeremy!" The sister standing next to me said, "See, I told you she was her favorite." Okay. So Jeremy goes to Mom's bedside and he holds Mom's hand and she says, "Jeremy, for God's sake, put the cat out." Everybody's kind of uncomfortable about this point. And they're all looking at Jeremy. Jeremy very carefully takes his mother's hand and he looks into her eyes. And at this point, I'm thinking, he's going to say, "Mom, Fluffy will meet you on the Rainbow Bridge." Instead, he holds her hand and very tenderly says, "But Mom, we never owned a cat." Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy, for finding the humor in the morbid. Appreciated. All right, Rob Weiss. Hope I'm saying your name right. Rob, welcome.
Okay, I didn't really expect to make the cut. Okay, all right. I'm going to start by way of talking about a priest friend of mine and one of his favorite homilies, very briefly. Father Jerry Krings, he did this homily, and my church community was going through a rough time, and he said to us, he said, close your eyes, take a moment, think about what your favorite book is, and that's your theology. That's the philosophy under which you live your life, which I think is really powerful. But the problem is I don't have a favorite book. But I do have a favorite movie. And actually that movie works out pretty well as a favorite theology, and I'm gonna have to explain it to you after I tell you the title. Because the title of my favorite movie is The Poseidon Adventure. When I first saw The Poseidon Adventure, of course, I was a little kid, and it was just amazing. The explosions and people falling in places, and everything's upside down. It just was like, how did they do that? And what's gonna happen next? But I kept watching that movie over and over and over. And, I had to sort of say to myself, why is this movie so relevant and meaningful and purposeful? And there really is a theology behind it, at least for me. Because what I saw in that movie is a small group of people who, in spite of all kinds of odds, had to continue to persist. And what they were heading towards was their own salvation. I think about, those groups of people, and I'm going to focus on one, and that's Shelley Winters. And the reason I want to focus on that her character, is because I watched as the group continued to move through the story. They first start with having, a group of people who tell them, don't do anything, stay where you are, And they make a choice to, and I don't know how much more you can get in terms of theology, climb a Christmas tree. They climb a Christmas tree to the next level. They have to make a choice to go climb a Christmas tree. And I think to myself, sometimes in my life, do I have what it takes to go against what other people say and climb that Christmas tree? Can I do that? What's interesting to me about Shelley Winters as a character is throughout most of the movie, she's just dead weight. I mean, literally, there's a moment where they're pulling her up and she's just dead weight all along the way, And she's like, just, sort of trying to be positive, but everyone's like, oh my gosh, is she gonna get through the tunnel? Is she gonna, are we gonna get her up? And so she's just sort of this little bit, very kind woman, but nuisance that everybody's kind of carrying along. Till there's this one point. And if you've seen the movie, you know that point. She's always talked about how she's a good swimmer. And one of the characters gets stuck and is underwater. And everybody's arguing about what to do and how to solve it and stuff like that. But Shelley knows what to do. She knows what to do. And she doesn't ask for any permission. She dives into the water and she swims. And if she did not do that, I don't think that those characters would have made it through. At least me as a child certainly felt that way. And to be candid with you, that's how I feel today. And my question for myself is, can I go against what others say about me or suggest about me or tell me as to who I am in terms of being able to do what I think I need to do? And there was a moment in my life where I did get a chance to really have that. And that was at the flood of '93. And I'm gonna fess up and say for most of the flood of '93, I was a tourist. I walked around and saw the floodwaters. It was a nightmare for those of you who were born at that point. It was a nightmare. I was taking pictures, I was touring around. So I'm driving back from Alton into Florissant where I lived, and suddenly I see a bunch of cars pull off to the side of the road. And I didn't know what happened, but I knew something happened. So I pull off to the side of the road, and I run to this bank just in time to see this van roll into the lake on its side and sink. And it's amazing to me how quickly that lake just sort of became like there was nothing there. And so I didn't think anything about it, by the way. I'm not a great swimmer, and I don't know, anything about CPR or any of that stuff, but what I did know is somebody needed to go in that water. And so I pulled all my keys out and I jumped in the water, and I wasn't the only one. There were other people that showed up. We open up the door, this lady pops out, we pull her out. There's purses that are coming to the top, we're pulling those out. Ladies are coming, we're pulling the side of the van. 3 ladies, we get out. We know there's a 4th because they're telling us there's a 4th, but we can't find her. We don't know where she is. And finally, this woman pops up, and I hear out on the banks, I hear somebody say, "Oh, she's dead." And I was so pissed off because I'm like, no, she's not dead. We just saved her. She's here. And so we pulled her and got her on the shore, and thank God, because somebody knew CPR, she was alive and she was just fine. At that moment, I'm so grateful that I made that choice to do that. And what I hope for myself, by the way, is that should something like that happen again, I'll have that chance. One last thing I want to share with you. We also, like I mentioned, pulled out all the purses from the van except for one. And I'm sitting next to these ladies on the shore, and they're looking at each other, and the one notices that everybody's got their purse, and she looks out and she goes, "Could somebody go get my?" "Oh, never mind, thank you."
Thank you for that story, very harrowing. And I guess thank you to Poseidon's Adventure for inspiring your bravery there. All right, we have Christina Nanini. Hope I'm saying that right. Christina, please welcome.
When I was really little, I told my mom that we would surely die together, for I could not live without her. She responded something to satisfy me along the lines of, "That sounds nice, but it doesn't always work that way." 4.5 years after being cured from triple-negative breast cancer, after all the harmful treatments and a double mastectomy that we knew would be worth it, and celebrating each year she was considered cancer-free, my mom started having intense stomach pains. We found out her breast cancer had come back and was in her liver. For a 3-month period, our lives were consumed with stress and fear. I remember her saying she loves life so much, she just loves looking at trees. After all of that initial shock and a lot of disturbed contemplation about the meaning of life, we all pushed on and lived some of the best moments of our life that I will ever remember together. What also helped my mom not lose hope was the distraction and horror over Trump's behavior. This was during 2016. We danced all night at a pink ball supporting Planned Parenthood and marched the whole next day at the inaugural Women's March in DC, despite my mom having numb feet from chemo. My mom placed pressure on our representatives at the time for their efforts to dismantle the health insurance she was on, Obamacare, that was saving her life. My mom was a devoted activist, and the fact that she had metastatic breast cancer did not have an ultimate influence on our lives for even a moment during this period, except for the fact that breast cancer propaganda was extremely painful for us. Statements like finding a cure and weird pink things for sale were hard to be around, such as tortilla chips at Jewel Osco. We dreaded October, Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I still dread October. People with metastatic cancer are reminded again and again their condition is uncurable. Ultimately, as much as I was hiding my mom and me from those stories, that also became ours. My mom was so proactive in her treatment that although she was stable at the time, she got a procedure done called Y90 exactly a year ago while my parents were in the middle of a move to New York State. She started developing fluid in her stomach and was in and out of the ER. Ultimately, her heart was struggling and her liver was starting to fail. She blamed Y90, but I don't know that we can, and either way, she was going to do whatever it took to have as much time as possible with all of us. I was trying so hard to shove food in her mouth. I was shoving clementines into her mouth to try to make her work to get back her strength so she could fight again like she had so many times throughout the previous 8 years, both politically and medically, but this time she couldn't. I never would have been prepared for that moment, and my mom knows that. I had to say goodbye to her as she was panicking in a hallucinated state with her chemicals all off balance. I made it back to Springfield, and the next night, on Monday night, my sister called me that my mom had coded. I jumped in the car and started driving to New York State. My phone had no charge. I had no idea where I was going. I was following signs on the highway, north and east, totally out of my mind, hunched over and a mess, very dangerous. All of a sudden, I sat back, just physically sat back. I felt a strong push on my shoulders, and I felt arms wrap around me from behind the seat. I moved my head, because I was like, did I just feel that, or did I just think that? But why would I have just thought that even? My sister called me within 5 minutes of that feeling that my mom was gone. My mom's death was not worthy of her life, whose ever is or could be. And while some might think that because it was due to an illness in the way that it happened, it would be more expected, we had no indication it was happening when and the way that it did. She was chugging a drink in the ER that was supposed to help her heart but tasted terrible. My mom did anything and everything for the longest time, and her still trying so hard despite not having the strength to stay with us was an example of her love, the strongest form of love I will ever experience that has transcended her death, and I still feel as strongly as ever like she's never left. Through this, my mom taught me to think very small scale when we were scared of the large unknown, savor this meal, watch trees and flowers bloom, sit in silence or gab up a storm with people that you want to do those things with, watch TV or read a book, do what you want. Don't waste time doing anything else or being around people that only give you stress. Without my mom, I have lost that savoring view of life. For the majority of the last year, I lived in a disgusting apartment. I slept more than I was awake, trying to drown out my thoughts, because all I could think about was wishing my death would come sooner. Because of my favorite person's death, predictably, my life has changed forever. But slowly, and with the help of a wild dog, my horse and my cat, and a little bit my husband, I'm making my way back to that savoring view of life that my mom taught me. Cheryl Strayed, the author of Wild, described the time period after losing her mom as one in which she conjured her mom in everything she did. And slowly over time, she lost the materials she used in her conjuring, such as clothing items. I've taken pretty much all of my mom's clothing, and things that reminded her of her mom, and she just became her mom. My life has been slowly gaining back the meaning lost through my mom's death by recognizing that same transformation in myself and gaining the strength to pick up where she left off. See, my mom's life could never, not even a piece of my mom's life could be captured in 5 minutes, but all I would ever give her death is at most 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christina. Going to pull probably a couple more names at this point. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get to everybody, but this is where there's that ... to be decided. Hopefully we do this again, and everybody will eventually get a chance to share their stories, because they're great. So the next person up tonight will be Piero Teco. Piero, welcome, welcome.
Awesome, thank you. I'm not short, so I will put this up. All right. So I'm the oldest of three, and there's a big age gap between my middle sister and myself. So of course, I became kind of pseudo-parent, babysat, but I was still old enough to remember when they were first born and how fun all that was. It's always fun to have a new baby. But then it got less fun. And I didn't really get to be a young person until I got away from all of that and all the little kids and go into college. And the story I wanted to tell today happened after college. So like a lot of us did in 2009 when you graduate from college in a recession, I moved in with my parents. And so obviously I wanted to get moving as quick as possible. So I became reacquainted with an old friend from high school who was a single mom, and it felt familiar. It felt like me. It felt safe. I started falling into the same roles. Eventually her daughter starts coming in, starts becoming more a part of our lives. And, sorry. Hope less spot here. Oof. Okay, so one day, everything's going great. We have a little spat, and I'm late for work. I run out, and I want to make sure to try to smooth things over. So I remember her saying that there was issue with her muffler. It was giving her like a headache. There was fumes and everything else. And I was like, you know what, I think I could probably fix that. I know just enough about cars to get myself in trouble. So I looked under, and sure enough, the muffler had split right under the driver. So I grabbed the scissor jack, popped it up, and I was like, I'll just slide under there, and I'll just move it up. And that was easy. But what I didn't realize was you just don't put things on a scissor jack alone, because you move the whole car when you move a little bit of it. So 5 inches is the space between the floor and the little bead that you put the thing on. So I'm not 5 inches, I'm a little bit bigger of a guy. So luckily, suspensions are a thing and self-preservation is a thing. So everything kicked in, and oh man, I've tensed all my muscles. I started yelling for help. I grabbed the scissor jack. I'm trying to undo it, trying to jack it back up. All I see are feet, but then 2 people come. I don't know who they are, still don't. He's telling her, call 911. He's trying to keep me calm. I'm like, you got to move this thing off. Here's the scissor jack, and he's 911 say, don't do it, because they're worried that it's keeping me together, So I assure him, and I was like, listen, I can kind of breathe still, but that's going to change if you don't help me, like right now. And luckily, it was very convincing. And he didn't listen to 911, which don't do that. Listen to 911. And I sat still, and at that point in time is when I saw the feet of my girlfriend and her daughter come out, and I could hear she was super panicked, and the little girl was scared, but they didn't know who she was, and they asked, oh, like, how can I help? They said, oh, go watch our newborn, because there was a baby they had left to come help the screaming man in the parking lot. And so they went, and the paramedics come, they pull me out, they cut open my shirt to make sure I'm okay. They asked me where the old scar was from. I was like, that's where the car was, like no scar. And they put me on the stretcher and going to the hospital, going to the ambulance, and I'm crashing from all the adrenaline. And I just start to like cry, and the paramedics are like, oh man, like, are you okay? Like, are you having any pain or anything? And I just say, no, I just feel so bad. My girlfriend and I just had a fight, and she's gonna just feel awful about this whole thing. And it was not the healthiest thing to be saying at that moment. And now looking back at that, the lesson I like taking from that, because luckily I was physically okay. Like, obviously I'm still here, and actually didn't break anything either, just a couple of strained muscles. And since it was still early 2000s, they gave me some opioids and just sent me on my way. But what I really took away from my near-death experience was that there's a really big difference. The relationship didn't last much longer. Obviously, it wasn't super healthy. But there is a really big difference between having the honor to live with an equal partner, who I've been married to now for like 3 years, and she's awesome, than dying just living for somebody else. So thank you.
Thank you, Piero. And now we have Meredith Cargill. Welcome.
I was driving in the rain down Interstate 24 in Tennessee, listening to a radio station out of Nashville. And dead ahead, a lightning bolt struck a hilltop about a mile ahead. And that instant, the radio station I was listening to ceased.
Our general manager is over there, his heart's palpitating. Well, thank you all so much for coming. I think it's clear we're all winners here. We invited some people because honestly, I wasn't sure how many people would show up. Ye of little faith, I should have known that our community would turn out for an event like this, and I'm excited to see what might be coming next. So again, just a round of applause for everybody who shared. And to those who we didn't get to hear from, we hope to hear from you at a later date. We do have one closer for the evening, a treat. This is a local poet, activist, writer. Her latest ministry is baking banana bread, so hot tip if you're into that, maybe talk to her about how to get hooked up. Shatria Smith will see us out for the evening, so welcome, Shatria.
My daughter's back there, so I'm really excited about this. All right, 5 minutes. No talking. Fear. I am afraid of the darkness, the deep recesses, the what could happen if I close my eyes again. The dark figure, the light at his back, the approaching, the pretending to be sleep as the monster takes my innocence. I am afraid of the darkness because it never happens in the light. I am afraid of the darkness, the plot to hold, the skeleton arms stretching to keep away the touching, holding my lips tight, the piercing, the unsurrendered unsuredness of safety. Who was the culprit? Who taught me to fear? I am afraid of the darkness because it never happens in the light. I am afraid of the darkness. Nyctophobia with upheaval, waiting for the right zone, the trepidation in the heart, palpitation, that stiffness to the bone, making rigid what was once soft, making memories disappear for safety's sake. I am afraid of the darkness because it never happens in the light. Monsters. Sometimes it feels like the third party to my own memories, like history on my journey. My personal, fluent Stockholm has always had the recollection of lost time, so much so that I have thankfully blocked out traumatic events to deal with my life. Unable to describe or articulate or navigate in that moment, it disappears into the darkness, which I protect myself from at all cost, because there are monsters that ate the bones in there. Much like the front row seat of history. We are not different, but cogs, a thread in the fabric that bind us. I have been given and accepted names, living as an alternative of me for many situations, a chameleon, capable to manipulate myself for a greater good, carrying my developmentally disabled memories to be reminded like an analogy. The times. Beyond personal understanding, but urgency, like now, right now. A smell, a word, feelings, reminders, driving past the house that I was raped, trigger emotions that are tragic but beautifully vibrant. I have to process this information, envelop it with a third eye, like a third party, fear, embrace the pain, accepting what the lesson has taught me, both good and bad. I write it down. I endure with positive affirmations to end each emotional dialogue, shining in the light into the darkness, combating the bad with a personal resurgence of deed and prayer and honesty and hope. I have to protect myself at all costs because there are monsters that ate the bones in there. Once again, an abundance of love with fleshy overtones, a gift from God above, touching with scores of words, bound and obligated to family to the core, slowly reaching a destination that no one was wishing for, until we came to the brink, no longer able to hold up her head, our pinnacle of strength wasting away in a hospital bed. My love, Madi, you meant so much more than life to me. You took me out of my unworthiness and showed me a me unafraid of duress. giving me power where the light was dim. You're not only my grand, but my favorite friend. Peacefully now, she looks upon us from her crypt. Her spiritual stones lay a path and a blissful script, leading to tranquility, humanity. The stillness of her once beating heart now beats within me, not so far apart. I truly miss her hearken, even her words of scorn. Without her understanding, I felt my life was torn. Making a way to touch her, I bore a her of my own, so I could have her fleshy overtones back upon the throne. She is reborn to my delight. Though her skin is new, I have remade my confidant. Even though her name is new, I see it in her creases, in the hair that is so fine. I see the thoughtful pieces that cannot be defined. I have made the lasting journey to make the old reborn. Without my understanding, I felt my life untorn. I only got 5 minutes, y'all. So this is gonna end with my favorite poem, and I hope it's a homage to Springfield, because this is my home. So, we laugh, we sing, we cook in here. We live, we bathe, we rear in here. We play, we read, we write in here. We sleep soundly without light in here. We clean, we drink, we craft in here. We peek, we eat, we stay in here. We hug, we tough, we share in here. We work, we love, we pray in here. We think, we cry, we wait in here. We dress, we bless, we make it clear. We care, we chill, we are real in here. We solve and we watch what we say in here. Home. Wait. All right, can I ask for a selfie? That would be awesome. Let me get a Hey! Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, so thanks everyone for coming. Hopefully you left an email address so we can keep you posted of things to come. If you liked tonight, if you have ideas, feedback, be in touch. We listen to the community in terms of our programming and our events. So happy to hear what you thought, and just thanks, drive safe, look at some art if you want. Thanks.